welcome to everyone for joining us this morning. Today's topic is focused on the Horizon Europe call, European regions as users of Galileo and/or Copernicus. It is about pre-commercial procurement. We want to learn more about the call strategic autonomy in developing, deploying, and using global spaced infrastructure, services, applications, and data. We have with us today Vasilis Kalogiro from the EU Agency for the Space Program, and we have from the European Commission, from DG Connect, Lieve Bos, to tell us more about the instrument, the PCP instrument as such, and we want to engage with regions on their ideas and maybe hear also first pitches. I see in the list of participants many familiar names, and thank you for joining, but I see also many new names. That's why maybe I say also a word or two about Nereus. We are a network of European regions focused on spreading the use and understanding of space technologies, Earth observation, global satellite navigation, bringing space increasingly into regional contexts of territorial and public policies. User uptake, growing the understanding of potential users, and stimulating the development of space applications are important elements of our interregional cooperation. And for this, we consider the instrument very, very important to stimulate uptake and to bring also more space solutions to the regional level. We see our platform as an important forum to support regional stakeholder and to better access and to be better informed about EU programs and funding opportunities, and we support them to better access them. With this, I like to give the floor to Vasilis Kalogiro to give us a presentation on the open call. Please, Vasilis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roya. Good morning, everyone. I welcome also the participants on this webinar. It's I think it was a very good idea, and I have to thank you also, Roya, and to you, Margarita, for the common work that we did in the last weeks in setting up and organizing this. I will share now my presentation. Just give me a sign if you see the first slide.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, excellent. And just starting by saying, we believe that European regions are important, I would say, key stakeholders to reinforce the adoption of EU space program components because they have needs. They have needs and they face challenges every day that we believe they can be tackled by innovation. They can be tackled by research and development tools that we try to develop. And I will be talking a little bit. I will give a very, very short introduction. I don't want to brag a lot about let's focus on our specific topic. So in the framework of Horizon, we have a topic which is called Public Sector as Galileo and/or Copernicus User. This is the name of the topic, and this is actually the title of my presentation. So my name is Vasilis Kalogiro. I'm a Space Downstream Research and Innovation Officer. I work in the Market Downstream and Innovation Department in EUSPA. So I talked in the very short introduction about the about the adoption of EU space program components, but the question is which are the components of the EU space program. And here you have a slide which encompasses and shows all the different components, which are part also of we still call it new. It's more than a year actually that this Space Program regulation went on, so establishing the EU Space Program. And you might ask, but didn't we have an EU Space Program before? What we did have before were different components, technological components, different regulations, and the new regulation put under one umbrella all these different components, the EGNOS and Galileo on one side, the Copernicus, the Earth observation flagship program of the Union, the GovSatcom, the governmental satellite communication component, which will be evolved. I trust that many of you have heard the Secure Connectivity Initiative and the IRIS-2 agreement, which was principally put forward some days ago and was reached in the news, and also the SSA, the Space Situational Awareness. We will be focusing, and this is the focus also of the topic, on the Galileo and Copernicus application. These two important components of the EU Space Program. On Galileo side, the global satellite navigation and positioning system of Europe, with many receivers at European level, which we try to reinforce its adoption, but also Copernicus on the Earth observation side. A couple of words on our approach in EUSPA before going into the detail on the topic. So we base our work in the market development in these three, three different areas. We call them pillars. So of course, if we want to act on the market, and this is what we do, we first need to know the market itself and the users. So on the market side, we do a lot of market intelligence, and we published earlier this year our market report, which for the first time encompasses also the Earth observation sector. So it's a market report for Earth observation and the GNSS sector. You will find it online if you Google, but also you will see it in our website. So it's a very important tool for us to understand what kind of applications, the new trends and the applications that are forecasted to grow in the next decade. So we can, let's say, focus our attention and our investment towards these areas. But it's also a very, very useful tool also for industry. I know that among us today, apart from representatives for European regions or cities, we also have some representatives from the industry. We also do, of course, the user consultation platform. We invite users to talk to us, and we did in October, in the beginning of October, our user consultation platform. Many of you actually were present there. Then apart from the knowledge part, we also support the demand. We have segmented the market in different market segments. So we have a very focused approach towards the market. And the last part is why we are here, the offer creation. So we use our R&I tools to create offer and build made in Europe application products and services. And one of these tools that we have is the Horizon Europe. And now I'm coming to the call. This is our second Horizon Europe call. It is right now open for applications. That's exactly why we are starting raising awareness about this call. The deadline of the call is the 2nd of March, so there is still time for interested consortium, to be formed and apply. You see these 6 different topics that we have in the framework of the call. One on GNSS applications for smart mobility. The one we will be focusing the public sector as Galileo Copernicus user, but also some others, Copernicus downstream applications in the European data economy, large-scale Copernicus data uptake with AI and HPC, designing space-based downstream applications with international partners. And the last one, which is the only one that doesn't make reference to GNSS or Copernicus, is the one focuses on GovSatcom service development and demonstration. But we are here to talk about the pre-commercial procurement topic. So I will be going into explaining a little bit the topic itself. Well, my colleague from DG Connect, which I would like to thank for her availability to be here with us, will explain a little bit more in detail the type of action, the PCP tool itself, which is important that we have an understanding of what is this tool about for you that might be interested to apply. So we have for this topic 5.2 million euros. This is the indicative budget. And I will start with the problem that this PCP action tries to solve. We hear a lot from public entities, but also regions, I would say, or people working inside communities, regions, and city councils, that usually they don't have enough budget for research and development, because also this is not their focus most of the time. They lack innovation most of the time, but they want solutions that work, because this is why they procure actually. So they want things that work and they can trust. They have this tension to be risk averse, let's say, and also they don't trust innovative solutions. So actually, PCP is a tool created mostly to tackle this kind of mindset, let's say. So the funding opportunity that we have currently available, as I said, is the public sector as Galileo and Copernicus user. We try to stimulate demand-driven innovation by public authorities. And public authorities, and here we are especially discussing in that webinar the needs that come from European regions and cities and villages and communities in a broader scale. So our interests are into solutions that are based, of course, on GNSS, Galileo, Regros, and Copernicus, to build solutions for who. We have here some examples, and we have them also in our call, if you see it online, for monitoring infrastructure, for example, critical infrastructure managers like rail, road networks, and all the kind of infrastructure. A typical example also of public authorities that would be interested would be crisis emergency management and entities, the ones that respond, for example, to extreme events, civil protection agencies, mobility for cities, like building smart cities applications based on Galileo and Copernicus, but also coastal area monitoring and modeling. So we try to, and it's very important that I would like to highlight that the communities and the cities and the prefectures, the regions that have these needs that are part of this consortium, of course, as my colleague Lieve will explain in a moment, that it is very important that they are coming together to fund, to construct what we call this buyers group. They have this interest for a common invitation to tender, so they bring together their needs. So their needs need to be voiced in that sense, and it's not. And this is I'd like to highlight: it's not a typical tool like a typical research and innovation action, which we want the users to give us just some requirements, and then maybe at the end of the project just validate them. We want really active participation, because at the end of the day, these are the entities that will run the PCP. These are the entities that not only will express their needs in the form of an invitation to tender towards the industry, but they will also be there to evaluate, the proposals that we come from the industry. So this is quite important. And we want to see also demonstration on how sustainable is their solution. We want to get their feedback at the end of this action, if they would be interested to further buy. That's why we call them buyers, because maybe in the end of the project, what we would expect, and that would be an optimum, I would say, output, that they will buy actually the solution that comes out of it. So I put together one slide with some ideas, because I want to be more concrete rather than presenting you only that this is the topic that we have. So what would be interesting ideas? And I just highlight they are just ideas. You are free to propose any kind of challenge, any kind of problem that you have as a European region or as a prefecture. But I have some examples here, like, for example, systems that improve waste management in your city or in your area. We know very well, for example, that Copernicus can be used to monitor waste disposal areas, for example. And at the same time, you can have also the synergy with Galileo, asset management systems that can be installed, for example, in vehicles to track the gathering of the garbage, of the waste. We have also a lot of interest also on the geohazards and the extreme weather events, where of course the main actor there are civil protection agencies. But there is also the interest from cities, for example, and communities to have more efficient tools that they can assess the risk and the vulnerability and work together, for example, with civil protection agencies. So safeguarding communities from geohazards and extreme events is one other example. And something which also is connected to this second point is a specific example in the case of wildfire. the safeguarding cities, managing better what we call WUI, which are the wildland urban interfaces, where again the use of Copernicus can be very, very efficient of understanding which part of the urban fabric is in contact basically with forest areas or vegetated areas, which can give rise to certain risks, for example, for wildfires, so that local communities or even owners of certain areas or buildings can take action. The point on critical infrastructure is also a very good thematic area, very, very applicable. So we have managers of critical infrastructures in regions, for example, ports, rail infrastructure, road network, when we can again see actually also very good synergies between Galileo and Copernicus, where on the one side we have the observation component, understanding condition, understanding what is around critical infrastructures, and also having some kind of maybe networks that can utilize Galileo for also fusing the two data inputs. Mobility is by itself another category which I also personally see a lot of interest here. Mobility solutions. Maybe some examples also will be shown later by Lieve on, for example, installing Galileo devices on the tram network, on rail network, on the buses, for example, improving this kind of improving the mobility of our cities. But also this includes also drone operations. I provided one example, which I also like a lot, the drone operations to remote areas, for example, or islands on mountainous regions, which can be powered by Galileo, and specifically highlighting also the new services that are currently under development, the OCNME, which is the authentication service, and the high accuracy service, the HAS. So making use also of these. Then one example on the irrigation management system. Okay, now we're entering into agricultural applications, but it is also, I would say, of interest from local communities to be supported with more efficient tools, making efficient use of resources. And last, coastal protection monitoring system for example, regions or cities that have coastlines and they are, under certain risks. So we can imagine coastal protection system being built using the synergy between Copernicus and Galileo. But there are also more ideas that will come, I hope, from the participants, that will come from European regions, and I give as also a good input an excellent Nereus publication, Copernicus for Regions, where there are many user stories sheets that you can get some further ideas. So with this, I would like to finish here my presentation. I invite you to stay connected. The PCP topic specifically, you can just scan the QR code that I have here on the left, but you will of course find much more details in the funding and tenders opportunities portal of the European Commission, where if you just type the title of our topic, you will find more details. I repeat that the deadline is still on the 2nd of March in the future, so there is more time for creating consortia. And if you have more information, I invite you to also email us in research@euspa.europa.eu. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasilis, for your interesting and insightful presentation. I hope it will stimulate some stakeholders to take up their pens and bid into this opportunity. We have time for some round of questions. Please let us know in the chat if you have questions to Vasilis before we move on.
What we could also do is complete, let's say, our presentations also from the part of Lieve to present the tool, and then we can look
Maybe
into
more questions come up. Okay, Lieve, the floor is yours to present the PCP instrument. You are from DG Connect. Maybe you could also say something to your approach to the instrument. Please, the floor is yours. We can't hear you. In case you are muted, please.
Yes, no, yes, but maybe if you put the microphone a little bit closer.
Is this better?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
No, we can't hear you badly. You are very far.
How I could improve it, because I'm using the microphone already.
No,
But it's
now
much better.
Now it's
Now
no,
it's fine.
it's okay.
Now it's okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hello everyone, I'm Lieve Bos, and I'll explain you the way that the pre-commercial procurement funding instrument works in the Horizon Europe program. But first of all, why did we start with these instruments, this funding for innovation procurement? Well, we noticed that we spend a lot of effort on encouraging the supply side to be innovative, create new solutions, work together with the researchers, bring them to the market, but then they are on their own. And often many of the solutions don't make it successfully to the market because there is a lack, there is no bridge actually between what the demand side really needs. And the innovation procurement instruments, they try to bridge that. They ask the demand side, take the lead of a project, tell the supply side what you really need, work with them to make it happen in the way that the procurement really works. So that's the whole aim of the game, let's say. And there are two types of innovation procurement instruments that we have. But for this call, it's the pre-commercial procurement one that is being used here. So what is this? The name already says it a bit. It is about things that are still pre-commercial, so not fully commercially widely available yet. So when would you use such a tool? When you look around on the market as a buyer, as a region, as a city, and you see the solutions that I need, they are not really there yet. It's not even that there are solutions really close to the market that just would need some small adaptation or scaling up, and I could deal with that in a normal procurement. No, actually, there is still research and development needed, some development, some testing, because there are several different potential ways maybe to tackle the problem. Different suppliers have different ideas, and it's not really sure which one will work best. And it would be too risky to commit to go already for a large-scale deployment for one approach if you don't even know whether the other one works maybe better. And maybe you also want to attract new players. If you're in a market where there have been a few players always supplying all solutions, but there is a bit of a deadlock situation there of not enough innovation, this tool could help you also to attract additional suppliers to the market. So what is it then actually, pre-commercial procurement? What are they buying? They are buying research and development. So research, development, testing, and possibly also the deployment of the tested solutions, but not at a really commercial large scale yet, only those which have been tested. So what happens during this procurement itself is that it starts still with development. The procurers can formulate their needs from the beginning, and as they are working with the project throughout development and testing, they can steer this to meet fully their needs. And whilst they are steering this development, they can see the different solution providers developing and testing their solutions, can compare them, see all the pros and the cons, and build up their knowledge about, okay, what works well in this type of solution, what works well in this other type of solution. How would I now really afterwards want to approach a large scale deployment project? And this builds the confidence of the public sector in innovative solutions as they get to know them whilst they're being developed, and they see that, yes, it works when I test it. There are things that can really do what I need, even though they are really innovative. So what does it do, pre-commercial procurement, since there are potentially still different solutions on the market and you don't know which one would work best? It buys R&D from more than one supplier in parallel to compare these different approaches, to give them all a chance. and it evaluates them after critical milestones throughout the process. So typically after the suppliers have designed their solutions, have made a feasibility study, have prototyped them, and then afterwards, after they've really tested them. In order to make it interesting for everybody, to reduce the risks for the suppliers and for the buyers, they share these risks and benefits of the research and development, in particular when it concerns the intellectual property rights. So let's look into this a bit more into detail. So you see here on the slides these two types of innovation procurements that we support in Horizon Europe. On the right-hand side is the public procurement of innovative solutions. This is when research and development is over. You want to go for deployment of really commercial volumes of solutions. You use a procurement procedure as always, but it's focusing now on diffusing these still fairly new and just developed solutions. When we're talking about this call here, it's about the pre-commercial procurement phase before that. And as you see, you have there different suppliers that start in parallel the first phase, solution design. Those that have a good solution design that are among the best. The feasibility study shows that everything is feasible. They can move on to the next phase. They will develop their prototype, test it in lab conditions. Again, there might be some that turn out not to be feasible anymore after this phase, feasible in terms of technical or even financial requirements. And then the last phase takes place, testing an original first set of solutions, developing it and testing it on the field in the procurer's environment, seeing if it all really works as it's supposed to work. And then potentially the procurers can decide to also keep some of the solutions, so actually purchase them as part of this pre-commercial procurement. So you see the typical characteristics and multiple suppliers working in parallel. It's a phased approach, which means that the suppliers are not sure in the beginning when they start whether they will be able to continue all the way to the end. They have to keep on always working very hard to show that they're amongst the best in order to move to the next phase, and so on. And this kind of competition element make sure that everybody keeps doing their very best. And you don't see it in the slide here, but the IPR sharing is also part of this game, because what happens, the suppliers keep the ownership of their intellectual property. Whatever they develop during the procurement is owned by them. So this means that after the procurement, they can go and commercialize the solutions to anybody in the world. So they can also participate in these public procurements of innovative solutions afterwards, not only of this particular buyers group, but also procurements of other buyers groups. So this helps wider commercialization. This makes that suppliers can produce the solutions on wider scale and therefore deliver them at lower price to all the procurers on the market. Now, what is so special about pre-commercial procurement? It's something that is, legally speaking, buying research and development services, and these fall outside of the European and the international WTO procurement rules. So what does that practically mean? That these procurements don't need to be per se open to suppliers from everywhere in the world. And that also we can use conditions in these procurements to make sure that research and development, the majority of it takes place in Europe, just like we do in grant projects, let's say, which is something that is typically not possible in other types of public procurements, right? If you want to see examples of such procurements, you can click on the links at the bottom of the slides, where you can see hundreds of procurers around Europe who have already done them in all kinds of different domains. But let's have a look at some examples that are particularly interesting for you, as they were done by cities and regions in European projects like this call is looking for. So on the left-hand side, you see an example of a project that is still ongoing. It's in the last phase, and it's looking for artificial intelligence solutions for cities. and specifically solutions that could accelerate the transition towards climate neutrality of cities. So there are a bunch of cities in the buyers group, Helsinki, Amsterdam, Paris, and so on, that have together said we all have this same challenge. Copenhagen, for example, already has the ambition to be climate neutral by 2030, but they said, let's see if there are solutions that could even speed this up even more so that we can become climate neutral already earlier. They launched their pre-commercial procurement. There were hundreds of companies participating in their open market consultation. Finally, they got almost 100 offers. Luckily, they had already foreseen that there would be lots of interest, so they had foreseen lots of spots for companies to start in the first phase, the design phase of the PCP. Finally, there were around 20 in both of the challenges that participated, because the big challenges where there's a lot of CO2 emissions in cities are in the energy consumption and in the mobility, transport in cities. So there were 2 lots in this procurement. Companies could choose whether they want to focus on creating AI solutions for energy challenges or for mobility challenges. So in fact, they were doing 2 PCPs in parallel in one project, one focusing on energy, one focusing on mobility. So you see there around 20 companies started. In the second phase, there were still around 10 in each challenge. And in the third phase, that is ongoing now, that is finalizing almost now. There are 4 companies still in the energy challenge and 3 in the mobility challenge. And there are quite some interesting solutions coming out of this project. You can see it on their website when you click on the blue link, because these projects are still recent, their website is still open. On the right-hand side, you see another example of the Fabulous project. That's another one by cities, a group of cities that formed the buyers group, because I wanted to see if it would be really possible and what would be the best approach to create fully autonomous, so self-driving bus lines in the city. And not just buses that are driving in a street where there is nobody else on the street, but in the real life city environment with other cars, people on foot, people on bicycles, in rainy conditions, snow conditions, and all the real conditions that take place in a city. So this project has just ended this year, and you see there again an interesting group of cities from different countries. There were less suppliers applying to the pre-commercial procurement. It's maybe a more focused project on a specific topic, but the suppliers that participated were more consortia, so not just one supplier, but groups of consortia to handle the challenge together. So that's also a possibility, of course. And now the project was finished. They demonstrated the solutions. There are providers who were able to do it, run these buses in real city environments as part of a bus line where there are also buses that are not driven by robotics type solutions. And the first cities are just preparing now the deployment of these solutions. On the next slide here, you can start to see, okay, what have been the impacts of projects that have been completed already some time ago? Not so recent ones as the previous ones, but ones from a couple of years ago. What do they really deliver on the longer term? So if we look at the impacts for the procurers, you see when we look at these projects when they are finished, already 2 years after the project, more than half of the projects have procurers that have deployed the solutions already. Many projects focus also on improving interoperability of solutions, because typically in Europe, every country does its own thing. And then when we need a solution that needs to be coherent, we see that it doesn't work. With pre-commercial procurements, you can include interoperability requirements as a transnational buyers group from the beginning. So you ensure that solutions will be interoperable from the start. As I mentioned, there are also public buyers who on purpose create pre-commercial procurements with many positions in the beginning for companies to start, more than there are already suppliers on the market today that are typically acting in this sector, in order to attract new suppliers, small ones, to enter the market. And this has been helping also several projects to remove previous supplier lock-ins and deliver them cheaper products and higher quality products than were available beforehand. And in some areas, we see even that there are companies from Europe who are, thanks to these pre-commercial procurements, have already created totally new lead markets, have become leaders in the market in what they have created and are supplying now, not just in Europe, but also around the world. So you see two examples below. One of the first pre-commercial procurements that the Commission ever funded was the silver pre-commercial procurement, again with a group of regions and cities in the buyers group. They focused on getting robotic solutions developed for elderly. Several companies completed this challenge, but one of them, in particular, Bioservo, Swedish company, created an exoskeleton that strengthens the muscles in your body so you can do heavier tasks than with your own muscles. And this solution has become a worldwide leading solution. It's not only used in the healthcare sector, but also in factories, for example, to help people do heavy lifting. And it's used by NASA, but by very big companies building heavy equipment. The company grew very big, it's quoted on the Nasdaq, and so on. On the right-hand side, another similar project. It was not EU funded in the beginning. It was funded by Danish regions and hospitals. 2014, they realized there are quite a lot of hospital-borne infections. We need to get rid of that. Let's do a challenge and ask companies to build solutions that can disinfect our hospitals. A startup company that was created particularly for this project created the robotic solutions that could do that. It uses UV light. You see it in the picture that actually burns all the viruses and bacteria in the air and on the floors and so on the equipment in the room. And then came the COVID crisis, and everybody all of a sudden wanted disinfection solutions. So this company grew massively because they were prepared. They had done a pre-commercial procurement. They had already proven that it worked, and they were the first ones able to sell it on big scale, and they are now the market leader worldwide. They hold more than 70% of this robotics market. They've become a unicorn, really big company, very successful. So impacts on suppliers, has it really opened a route to the market for new small companies? Yes, we see that in pre-commercial procurements. It more than doubles the amount of contracts and the value of the contracts that are going to small companies. Over 60% of contracts going to very small companies compared to usually only 30% in typical public procurement. We also see that companies say that it quadruples their commercialization success rate. You see here how many contracts are awarded, how many companies, are successfully commercializing their solution. Companies that were in phase 3, of course, but also those that are in phase 2, and even companies that only participated in phase 1 still commercially successfully commercialize their solutions after the procurement. So the interaction with the procurers is very important to bring something commercially successfully on the market. What it also does, the procurement is helping the companies to attract additional financial investment. So it doubles their chances to win other procurements, to obtain venture funding, to partner with other big companies, to get acquired or do a merger, to go on the stock market. So we see really these rates going up when companies participate in innovation procurements. They grow faster also cross-border, 20 times more contracts awarded cross-border in innovation procurements. And they create indeed growth and jobs, so strategic autonomy in Europe. In all of the pre-commercial procurements that we have done, remember I said they don't fall under the international WTO rules. So we ask from the Commission side that buyers groups require that the majority of the R&D for the project is done in Europe. In reality, almost all of the R&D is done in Europe. Only when companies cannot do it or they really need some external cooperation, they include that in the project. So how does the instrument really work, this pre-commercial procurement funding instrument? What do you need to do to apply? You need to have a group, a consortia. You cannot apply on your own. You need to be a consortia with minimum 3 legal entities from 3 different member states or associated countries, as usual in Horizon Europe. But now, out of these 3, there need to be minimum 2 which are public buyers from 2 different countries, so that there is a buyers group. As you have seen in previous examples, there are typically more than 2 public buyers, 4, 5, 6, sometimes more. But the minimum that we ask is minimum 2 from 2 different countries. Can there be other types of buyers, or is it only public buyers? No, there can also be NGOs, there can also be private buyers, but they are just on top of the minimum 2 which need to be public buyers. Why? Because we want to stimulate public procurement to become more innovative, because it's typically the public buyers who are the most risk averse and who need to be motivated, incentivized by these projects to do that more. What about the suppliers then? Where do they come in? They are not participants of the actual grant. They don't become grant beneficiaries. They don't sign contracts with the Commission. It's only the buyers and whoever is around the buyers to help them, project coordinators, dissemination people, and so on. Okay, they enter the project, but the buyers, they will come in later when the procurers will start contacting the market and will start procuring. So what do we have then as different actors? We have a buyers group, the procurers, that will finance this procurement, that will launch it. And one of them will need to take the lead, because in one country, the procurement will need to be published under the procurement law, for example, of France or Finland. So there needs to be a lead procurer from this buyers group that says, okay, I will do it, I will publish it, I will coordinate this procurement for the group. There can be other beneficiaries in the projects, for example, entities that help the procurers to prepare the procurement, to train people, to do dissemination activities, and so on. There can also be third parties involved in the project that provide in-kind contributions to the procurers. For example, we had a project with fire brigades, where the fire brigades are not the actual buyers, it's where the ministries of interior, but the fire brigades put at the disposal of the project their test sites where the testing can be done of new solutions. Okay, then we are again with the suppliers here at the bottom. Where do they come in? When the public buyers will have won the commission project, they will start it, they will launch a market consultation, and then they will contact the market to come and talk to them, to explain what is available, what is not yet available, what can be developed within the time of the project and the budget of the project. That's when suppliers will start to get in touch with the project. And of course, when they launch the call for tender, of course, they will be able also to make offers. And then they will sign a contract, a procurement contract with the buyers, but not with the Commission. There's a lot of information on our website also about how do the PCP funding instruments really work, what are the conditions. The most important one is the first one. The general annexes of the work program explain all the conditions of how the PCP actions work. More information is also available in the model grant agreements, but it's best to first read the general annexes, I would say. And there are some guidance and frequently asked questions, but start from the top and go to the bottom. Eligible activities. So what can you get funded in such projects? Each project consists of 2 stages. First, the procurers will start preparing the procurement, and then they will start executing it. In the preparation stage, they will be preparing to do together one joint pre-commercial procurement. How do they prepare that? By first doing an open market consultation. They will publish that in the tender portal, the European tender portal, inviting every supplier around Europe and the associated countries to participate. That's just to verify whether what they have in mind as ideas to focus the R&D on is fitting with what the market can really deliver in that time and with that budget. And when they've finished this open market consultation, they will prepare their tender specifications and a joint procurement agreement. And once that's all done and ready, they will publish the call for tenders and start executing the procurement, which means then they will start buying the R&D, the testing will start, the validation of the solutions, and they can also buy them, as I said, keep them afterwards to use them as part of the procurement. There might be additional dissemination activities at the end of the project and preparations of follow-up procurements to deploy the solutions at wider scale. But there might be also other activities if there is a need to contribute to standardization, to change regulations, to certify certain solutions, to train users that will need to use the solutions. That can also be part of such projects. So it's like there are two types of activities that can be funded. In blue, in the middle, you see the actual core procurement cost. We co-finance the procurement cost at 100% because the funding rate for PCP actions is 100%. And we also co-finance in green around that all the surrounding activities that are needed to make the procurement happen. So the preparatory activities, this open market consultation, writing tender documents. During the procurement also the activities that the buyers need to do to test the solutions, to do dissemination activities and so on, to maybe standardize solutions, certify them. Networking activities, coordinating the procurement or coordinating interaction with other buyers across Europe. And after the procurements, there can also be still activities to evaluate the results, prepare follow-up procurements, dissemination of results, and so on. So it's quite flexible. The green part, everything that is needed to prepare, run, and follow up the procurement, if you justify it well in the project, could potentially fit there. And you see that the funding is also synchronized with the way that this project works. So in the beginning, when the project starts, they get a pre-financing, which should cover the activities of the preparation stage. Then when everything is ready to start procuring, they will get an additional pre-financing to cover also this procurement cost. There might be reviews during the project to follow up how it's going on, but finally there will be a final review at the end of the project with the final payment. So where is the money? Here is the money. The reimbursement rate is 100% for all the eligible activities. So it really takes away all the risks of the procurers because the Commission finances all the R&D activities that are being procured and all the activities that the procurers need to do to prepare and run the procurement and so on. It may even include these in-kind contributions that we discussed. And VAT is also an eligible cost. So on the procurement cost, if the buyers need to pay VAT, this can also be reimbursed, unless, of course, the beneficiaries can deduct VAT in their country, and they don't actually need to pay it. What else? There is something important here, that the main purpose of these projects is to procure, of course. So, as I said, there are two activities that can be funded, the procurement cost and all the surrounding coordination and networking preparation activities. But the main purpose is procurement. So the procurement cost needs to be minimum 50% of the total cost of the project that you plan. So you cannot do a project where 90% of the project is about blah, 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 coordination, preparation, and only a mini thing is being procured. No, the main thing of the project needs to be the procurement, and the surrounding activities need to be the smaller part of the project. Are there also indirect costs reimbursed? Yes, like the same as in other European projects, but not on the procurement cost, because that doesn't have any indirect costs on it. We already talked about the pre-financing, that it happens in these stages. So let's look at a real example of a PCP action. For example, a 5 million euro procurement action, which is almost the budget of this call also. You could, for example, we have seen projects that spend, for example, 700,000 on coordination activities and 4.3 million on the actual procurement cost. But it could also be divided differently, but it cannot be more than 2.5 million on coordination, networking activities, and there will need to be minimum 50%, so 2.5 million on the pre-commercial procurement cost. It's important to have enough money on the actual procurement cost, otherwise you will not get anything developed that is worth using afterwards. So make sure that you plan this well, which also means that you need to divide this budget, for example, this 4.5 million for the procurement cost, over these different stages, like we said. You need to think therefore about, okay, how much money of this 4.3 million will be needed for solution design, how much for prototyping, how much for the real final product development and testing. And typically things get more expensive as they go to the right. Solution design is far cheaper than really developing and testing the final solution. And you need to spread this budget also over the amount of suppliers that you want to be attracting and having competition doing this work during the different phases. So that's why I gave here an example. It's just an example of how other projects have divided the budget. Feel free to do it differently, but think about this because it will need to make sense, your budget distribution that you describe in the proposal. Finally, one question, because we haven't went into this in detail, I think it's one of the last slides. What happens, in fact, with this IPR allocation? So, the companies will retain the IPR that they generate. And the buyers group will obtain also something, of course, because they need to make sure that they will not be, not be able to use the solutions afterwards, or that they will not be completely locked in afterwards. So what do the buyers group obtain in terms of IPR-related rights during the project? They will have license-free rights to use the results afterwards and during the project, of course, also for their own use. So they will not have to pay to use the results for their own use. They also have some licensing rights. They will have the rights to require the suppliers that were in the PCP to grant licenses, non-exclusive licenses, to other third parties on the market. For example, there are other suppliers that need to work with the procurer. They need to have access to the solutions of the PCP providers to make their own solution work. They will then get those licenses to do that. Now, what happens if after a project, the suppliers that were in the PCP or some of them don't do anything with the results in the end? They don't commercialize the solutions, or they use them against the public interest, not for what they were intended for. Then in that very specific case, which has never happened up to now over all the years that we're funding this project, the buyers could, in the worst case, call back the IPR rights. That's why it's called a callback right. They can say, okay, you are not using the results or you're abusing them. We've given you enough time and reasons to explain. We're not happy with this happening, so we require that you give us back the ownership of the IPR so that we can give it to somebody else who will really commercialize the results as they were intended to. But like I said, this is like the last resort if all goes wrong, but it has never been used so far in all the projects that we funded. Interesting also is to know that there is something new here in Horizon Europe compared to Horizon 2020. There is a possibility to apply these pre-commercial procurements in a fast-track way. What does it mean? You can combine the second and the third phase into one if you already have commitment that you will deploy the solutions afterwards. So you can do all the development and testing in one phase, in fact, and deploy even the solutions within the PCP. If there are no 3 suppliers in Europe who could develop such solutions, in such cases you could also start with 2 suppliers instead of minimum 3 in the beginning of the PCP. But that is in very specific cases, like in supercomputing, for example, there are no 3 suppliers in Europe, so there they start with 2 sometimes. In most other cases, we've always had multiple suppliers, far more than 3 even starting. Then there is something new also with regards to the strategic autonomy of the European Union. Like I said, the procurements do not have to be open to all suppliers around the world. They can be limited to the European countries and the associated countries. And if there are specific security, if the project is focusing on specific security related issues, then it could be even further limited to European suppliers from member states. And then also the place of performance condition. Remember the condition that the majority of the R&D needs to be done in Europe can be limited to European suppliers, or to do the security R&D, for example, even completely in Europe, while the non-security R&D can be mostly in Europe and still a bit outside of Europe. So all these things need to be well designed, well thought through when you create the tender specifications, and also discussed during the open market consultation to see if the market is able still to work under these conditions. But like we said, all the notices for these procurements will appear in the TED, the Tender Electronics Daily, the European version of the official journal. So there you will be able to see all the open market consultations that are announced, all the call for tenders, all the contract award notices of all these procurements. In the commercialization clauses of the contract, there may be also European strategic autonomy considerations. For example, it is possible for procurers to restrict the companies, to put restrictions on them to do licensing or transfer the IPR exclusively outside of the EU, because if they transfer it exclusively outside of the EU, it means that nobody in the EU will be able to continue to commercialize these solutions anymore, and the buyers will be stuck. So watch out if there are such conditions, and how you phrase them to make them workable. There could be also in specific situations requirements to source strategic components from within Europe, like was done during the COVID crisis, and this is really important when there are shortages of supply, for example, and so on. There might be also requirements to do the commercialization after the pre-commercial procurement, to do a minimum amount of that, keep on doing a minimum amount of that in Europe. So all these things are possible. They are not mandatory, but it is something that the buyers can consider. So take into account when you read these tender documents, that this may be in there. Voila, that was it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lieve. Yes, in the meantime, we have a whole pile of questions, and I'm looking forward to share them with you. Francesca, maybe just one organizational. Francesca asked if the recording will be made available. Yes, if we have authorization from the speakers, we will make the recording available, and also their publications, their presentations. Then we have a question from Xavier Leblanc. How can we propose space technologies for a group of users without having previously defined with them the minimum performance to expect?
I don't know if Lieve wants to take this one. I think with her presentation more or less replied this question, that there will be the minimum performance and the requirements will be set in the joint invitation to tender that the buyers group will publish. And of course, as Lieve explained, there will be also a market consultation. So there will be more pragmatic, let's say, this minimum performance. I don't know, Lieve, if you want to add and answer.
Yeah, that's completely correct. So from the beginning, before the procurers start procuring, they will come with their ideas during the market consultation. Hey, this is the problem that we want to address. We really want to achieve this and this and this. So new functionalities, better performance, lower price, maybe all these kind of things that today they think are not good enough in the existing solutions that need to be improved. And that's where you can discuss with them and tell them, oh, but this is not realistic, or that can be even done even better. You are not ambitious enough there, for example. That's where this whole discussion takes place. And based on these lessons learned from the open market consultation, the buyers will then formulate their tender requirements and publish them.
Then the next question from Johannes Schmidt. Can non-EU members be part of the consortia as PCP acts outside of the VTA, GPA, and EU procurement rules?
Yeah, in theory they can, but in practice it's difficult. I mean, for European member states and associated countries, there it works because also we fund them at 100%. So if they participate under exactly the same conditions, even funding conditions. And we've had projects, for example, with Turkey, with other associated countries in them in the buyers group, even being the lead procurers sometimes. But for countries that are really third countries, that are not member states, not associated countries, the way that the procurement rules are designed in these countries, they're not aligned with the ones that the member states are using. I mean, they have the same exemptions for R&D as we have in this WTO context, if it's a WTO country, but their own procurement rules are typically so very different, and they would have to fund their own participation to the project because we don't finance them, that it has never happened before. It becomes so complex that in the end it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So try to keep it manageable also. That would be my advice. Don't overcomplicate things if it's not needed.
Okay, very precious piece of advice. Thanks, Liebe. Next question from Grazia Fiore from Eurosea. Should all buyers in the group want to procure the same solution?
Well, we are talking about a pre-commercial procurement, right? We're not talking yet about buying a PPI procurement to buy really large-scale deployment. So in a pre-commercial procurement, there is still this element of, okay, we need new R&D. We don't know exactly yet what will be the best solutions. So we cannot guarantee, and we don't ask you to guarantee as a buyers group that afterwards you will buy exactly the same solution, because we don't even know yet what will be the best solution. If there is even a best solution that will really work, we don't know yet at the start of the project. But what needs to happen is that the buyers groups all share the same procurement need. They all want to find the solution to solve this same common problem that they have. So because, you know, all noses need to be directed in the same direction, of course. They all need to launch one procurement together that is looking for solving the same common problem. During the procurement, you will discover that, oh, some things are working, some things are not working, some solutions that I thought were fantastic are totally not fantastic. And then it may happen that some procurers at the end of the project decide, for my practical situation, that one would be better. For my practical situation, oh no, that type of technology would be better. Might be that afterwards they buy solutions based on different technology to solve the same problem, or even that they buy combinations of different solutions to solve the same problem.
Lieve, if I may add also that I think there is a possibility also for creating two different lots, for example, if they see that there are different needs or there might be some geographical, for example, requirements that are very specific, right?
Yeah, true. That's why I also gave in one of the examples an example with a lot. Remember this artificial intelligence for cities with one focus on energy problems, one on mobility problems. But be aware that this reduces the budget, of course, a lot, because each challenge will then have only part of the budget, and the budget of this call is not that very high, 5 million to do everything. So to have real impacts, I would avoid splitting up the money even much more in sub-challenges, because otherwise it will be too hard for the suppliers to deliver anything really that makes a difference.
Thank you. Next question from Gianluigi Renzo, AMFM Relay Italy. That's a very good question. Where can we find other public authorities interested in the same PCP?
Yeah, that's a question that often comes back. There are a number of, I should have put some links on the slide, I forgot. Maybe I can still do it when you circulate the slides. There are some fora, like the European Procurement Forum or LinkedIn pages, or there is, of course, also on the Funding and Tenders portal, the page where this call is published. There you can also leave a message and say, hey, I'm potentially interested in this call. That's maybe even the best, the most central place where you can do that. And where other people can see all these messages, voila, and they can reply and find others that are interested. But yeah, indeed, the partner search possibility there that you can fill in and everybody can check that. But there are also other fora, like I say, where people leave messages. It's where do people find partners in practice? I think mainly in the communities that they're already working with. Because what do you need to farm a buyers group? You need to have some kind of collaboration that works, where you trust the people that you are working with, where you know that these others have been leaders in the field, so they will be probably interested in similar type of innovations as I am. So most groups, I have a feeling, are coming from procurers who know others that are also active in the field in other countries. For example, university hospitals that are leaders in cancer research, one new cancer solutions. They know who are the other big leading cancer hospitals in other countries. They contact them directly and form consortia, for example. So think about who are the other leaders in my field in terms of people who are always interested to do better, to be more innovative, to offer better solutions to their citizens and so on.
We have one more question from Francesco Macchi in regards to the event which will take place. That's we will say something about the other events. Then from Nicole Dutzke, if I understand you correctly, you are assuming that the need has already been developed. Is funding also possible that takes into account even earlier work? For example, to develop the need, partner search, and market and scientific analysis?
Yeah, there are such kind of projects in Horizon Europe, but not the PCP actions. The PCP actions you need in the proposal to already describe what you want to focus on, because if we say yes, we give you the grant, we're giving you the grant also to procure. So we need to know what you want to procure, what challenge you want to address. But there are other calls sometimes in the work program for coordination and support actions, or even in research actions or innovation actions, where people discover whilst they're, researching a certain area that there are some unsolved issues here that would be good to address with a procurement action later. Yeah.
And actually, some of the ideas that were proposed in the presentation that I gave, I have some potential PCP ideas for European regions. For example, you will see that some of them are maybe tapping into solutions that are there. For example, I'm talking about geohazards, extreme events, the critical infrastructure, irrigation management, the mobility thing. So solutions might exist, but they need to be further developed. It's not like you buy directly something, there has to be tailoring the solution to the needs, some further development. So that's maybe the misunderstanding, because Nicole is asking that we are assuming that the need has been already developed. No, there has to be also some further development there. This is why we have the phasing structure of the PCP instrument, actually.
Yeah, that's important to understand, that the research and development in the PCP is not about developing the need, but it's about developing the solutions to address the need. So the need, what is a problem that needs to be addressed? Do we need artificial intelligence solutions to tackle our climate change problem or not? That needs to be clear in the proposal. But how we will address it and what research and development companies need to do to make that happen, that can still be done during the project.
Okay, then one more question from Xavier Leblanc. What are the eligibility requirements for a member within a consortium to test or certify solution as part of the Horizon program?
So is a question for a procurer or for a supplier? Because actually
That's a good point. Yeah.
In our call for proposals, we don't specify, or most topics in fact don't specify what exactly we need to be tested. Sometimes there are some requirements. For example, in health calls, there have been commission units saying, okay, in order to ensure that there is some kind of minimum representable testing, we want testing to happen on minimum 300 or 1,000 users or whatever of the final solutions. But I think it's not the case in this call. So it will be up to the buyers group, depending on what's exactly the challenge that they want to address. Is it something in mobility? Is it something in waste? It might have totally different test requirements. So it's up to these procurers to think about, okay, how widely do we need to test it to make sure that we really test all the different aspects that we need to verify? And what exactly will we require that needs to be tested? And it's something that can also be discussed during the open market consultation. What is feasible in terms of testing and what is completely, undoable.
Mm-hmm. One question from Grazia Cesar. The preparation phase, where the public buyer publishes an open market consultation, is that part of the project itself, or must it be done before the submission of the project proposal?
No, that's part of the project itself. It's something that happens in the first months of the project.
Mm-hmm. A question from Janis Balke, Aviaspace Bremen. What is the maximum funding for each project?
This is defined in the work program, right?
Yes, but
In your
I don't know
space call.
if the question, if regards the topic, the assigned budget that we have is 5.2 million euros. Of course, as Lieve mentioned, this is not a budget that will foresee to accommodate, I would say, maybe even two projects, depending, of course, of what kind of needs exist there. So the maximum funding, in that case, what we have assigned is 5.2 million for the topic itself.
Yeah. So it's not that the commission says you have to do a procurement of 5.2 million or 4 million.
Exactly.
It's up to you as proposers to think, in my area with the complexity of the things that need to be developed for mobility or crisis management or whatever. This is what we need in terms of budget. So this is what we put as budget in our proposal. It's the proposers who propose the budget, but the maximum that you can propose is the 5.2 million.
And I think it's important that we highlight, and this is the reason we did this webinar with you, Roya, the importance that we want the participation of this PCP action from public authorities, and this specifically from regions, communities, people that work with cities on their problems, so that they can come together into forming the so-called buyers group and forming, of course, the consortium. They will be able, through the PCP and the funds that we will provide, to work for a period of time. Usually, I think it's maybe, you can correct me, maybe one year, more or less, the preparation phase, where they will, work on exploring the requirements that they have, put them on the paper, issuing the ITT. But before, I would say, the market consultation and before, which is very important, so they understand where the market is with respect to their expectations, then leading to the invitation to tender, and then from there on, all the different phases, like the study, the design part of the solution, the demonstration, etc. So it's a let's say a trip towards the target.
Yes, no, we promote that, and we see the role of regions key there. If you consider that 80%, 90% of satellite-based solutions are addressed to public users, it is crucial. And it is also when you look what's going on in regions, with the impact of climate change being more and more visible, with the impact of the pandemic being more and more visible, with a new transport solution urgently needed, with urban planning being also a crucial topic and very high on the agenda of many regions. We need to look into space-based solution, and we need to look how can we best implement them and mobilize region to get engaged. And therefore, we were happy to host this seminar. We will promote your experiences and your presentations as broadly as possible. We are also here if there are concrete question even to forward to you. I see there are no pitches. Nobody asked, volunteered to want to bring a pitch, but I think we had a lively discussion with the question. I see now no more questions. What I like to take the opportunity, we put you in the chat, the upcoming webinars we will have next Monday, the 5th of December, a next webinar on space and tourism. It will be about the open ESA call, and we have also a speaker from ESA and looking, exploring, discussing how a space solution can contribute to a more sustainable tourism. And we will have a next session on the tourism topic in January, discussing also with public users, discussing their needs. And I like to draw your attention to the webinar on the 30th of January. It will be together with the defense related network of defense related regions. And we checked if there is a problem with registration, but registration is still open. With this, I think I like to thank you all for foremost our speakers for joining today, but also all the participants for your interest, for bringing forward questions, and we wish you good luck with taking up this opportunity and to look into this call and maybe to respond. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Roya. Thank you, Liave.